Have you ever stopped to think about what actually makes nations go to war? I mean, it seems like it's always about power or land, right? But the reason, the big idea that convinces millions of people to fight and to die, well, that has changed in some really incredible ways. So let's dive into how Europe's motivations for war completely transformed over 3 crucial centuries.
We're going to track this amazing shift in thinking, from wars fought for the promise of eternal salvation, to conflicts all about a monarch's power and glory, and finally to massive battles for this abstract idea of a nation itself.
Here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the absolutely brutal religious conflicts of the 1600s, then jump to the calculated geopolitical chess matches of the 1700s. After that, we'll explore the explosive rise of nationalism in the 1800s. And finally, we'll see how all of these ideas are still very much with us today.
Okay, so our story kicks off in an age where your faith wasn't just some personal belief. No, it was the ultimate reason to go to war. And it led to some of the most unbelievably destructive conflicts in all of human history.
Now, you have to ask, why was this war so devastating? Well, think about it. When you believe you're fighting for the salvation of your eternal soul, there's no room for compromise. Your enemy isn't just a rival you disagree with, they're a heretic, an enemy of God. That makes the fight absolute. It's a fight to the death, and there's just no middle ground.
And the human cost, it's staggering. A third of the entire population in the German lands died. The devastation was so total that it took that region almost 200 years just to get back to its pre-war population. It's a terrifying reminder of what happens when ideology goes to war.
But then something starts to change. A huge shift in thinking happens. And a lot of it is thanks to guys like France's Cardinal Richelieu. Now get this, he's a prince of the Catholic Church, but he looks around and sees that the powerful Catholic Habsburg dynasty surrounding France is a bigger threat to his state than a bunch of Protestant princes. So he comes up with his radical idea, raison d'etat, or the reason of state. Basically, he argued that the security and power of your country is way more important than fighting for religious unity.
And this new way of thinking gets set in stone with the Peace of Westphalia, the treaty that finally ended the war. This thing was revolutionary. It basically created the international system we still kind of live in today, all based on this idea of sovereignty. It meant that from now on, the ruler of a country, not some outside power like the Pope, gets to decide what happens inside their own borders.
All right, let's jump forward into the next century. With religion sort of pushed to the side as the main reason for war, conflict becomes a tool of the state. It's now waged not for God, but for the king and his ambitions.
This slide just nails the difference, doesn't it? War totally transforms from this all-or-nothing holy crusade into a cold, calculated game of chess. The goals aren't divine anymore. They're very real. Territory, resources, and more power for your monarch. You could say the entire 18th century was basically one long, epic rivalry between the two superpowers of the time, Britain and France. They fought all these massive wars, all over the planet, from Europe to India to North America, and it was all about who was going to set the rules for this new global system.
So how did Britain, this little island nation, play this game? They had a brilliant strategy. They decided to be the holder of the balance. See, Britain didn't really want to conquer Europe. It just wanted to make sure nobody else could. So whenever France started getting too powerful, Britain would fund and support a whole coalition of other countries to knock it back down to size. It was a genius way to protect its own growing empire across the seas.
And then, bam! The French Revolution happens, and it just shatters that old world of kings and their games. It unleashes this incredibly powerful new force, nationalism. All of a sudden, people stopped seeing themselves as just subjects of a king. They were citizens of a nation, a community of people with a shared language, a shared culture, a shared destiny. And this fatherland, well, that was something worth dying for.
So how does this new nationalism actually start causing wars? Well, you're going to love this. The Crimean War, a huge conflict with Britain, France, Russia, the Ottoman Empire, the whole shebang, was supposedly sparked by a fistfight between Catholic and Orthodox monks in Jerusalem over who got to put their fancy cloth on an altar. Seriously. A tiny squabble over religious bragging rights. But of course, it was never really about the monks, right? That was just the excuse. The real issue was that old balance of power game again. Russia was getting ambitious, trying to expand its power, while the Ottoman Empire was getting weaker. So Britain and France jumped in to stop Russia from grabbing strategic sea routes and becoming too dominant.
So you can see the big players here. It's the old game of empires, but now it's supercharged with the brand new fuel of nationalism. For the first time, you have newspapers in London and Paris whipping the public up into a frenzy against the Russian Tsar. National pride was now on the line in a way it had never been before.
Okay, so after 3 centuries of shifting reasons for war, what are we left with? Well, these eras didn't just end and disappear. They layered right on top of each other, and they built the very foundations of the world we live in right now.
Let's just boil it down to the big takeaways. The wars for God gave us the idea of sovereignty. The wars for the king perfected the strategy of the balance of power. And the wars for the fatherland unleashed nationalism, a force so powerful it would lead straight into the 2 world wars of the 20th century.
And that brings us to one last big question. We've seen the reasons for war shift from the divine to the dynastic to the national. So when you look at the world today, what do you think is the grand justification for conflict in our time? It's definitely something to think about.